Welcome to our fifth and final Masterworks concert of the season on April 27 and 28. This concert will feature two works, the Violin Concerto by the Finnish composer Jan Sibelius, as well as the Enigma Variations by the English composer Edward Elgar. We begin the performance with the Violin Concerto by Sibelius. This work was written between the years of 1902 and 1904, and from the onset, it was a work that was considered one of the most difficult and one of the most beautiful in the repertoire. It was first performed by a violinist named Victor Novacek. Now, Victor, by all accounts, was an excellent teacher, not so much on the violin. The first performance was a huge disaster. Did not go well, and in fact, Sibelius pulled it out of public domain and asked that the work not be performed again for a couple of years while he could revise it. He did revise it, and he worked on it a good bit, changing a number of the aspects of the violin solo itself. Still one of the most difficult pieces in the repertoire. So to perform it for you, we are bringing in one of the best in the business. His name is Nicky Chewy. Nicky has won medals in many violin competitions and string competitions around the world. And he is currently the concertmaster of the Buffalo Philharmonic, which is where I met him. He's an extraordinary musician, and recently I caught up with him. I wanted to talk to him a little bit about how he thinks about this piece comes together and his relationship to the piece. This is what he had to say.
Actually, the Sibelius concerto is uh, this concerto means a lot to me. It's probably one of my very first concertos that I played with major orchestra. It was with the Montreal Symphony when I was 14 years old. I had played it in many different places since then, but it's what I remember when I first heard it was at a summer festival, and when the students was playing it, I absolutely fell in love with it, both for its intensity, the colors it's able to develop in the piece, the melodies, the virtuosity. It was like this amazing piece with everything that a violinist can ask for. It really shows a lot. Gives the violinist an opportunity to show what they're capable of. And yes, so actually, when I come to Windsor, I'll be performing that concerto, and then a couple weeks later, I'll be performing the Sibelius concerto as well in Buffalo. So it'll be nice to be able to do it, in a short span of time, and with you and with Maestro Joanne Fleta as well.
The work itself is in three movements, which is typical for a violin concerto, for any concerto really. The first movement is in what we call sonata form. That's to say, you have an exposition of ideas, development, where they take those ideas and mix them up, and then a recapitulation where those original ideas come back. The thing that's extraordinary about this movement is that the development section, the middle section, is all for violin alone. It's the violin cadenza, a huge violin cadenza that really calls on the virtuosity of the soloist playing it. The second movement is very intimate, very beautiful, and has a real nod to Beethoven, a composer that was a huge inspiration for Sibelius. The final movement, the finale, is different from the other two completely. It is very dance-like and has these cross rhythms, dump, digga dump, digga dump, dig, digga dump, digga dump, digga dump, going on at the same time. And you get this sense of almost like a polonaise. In fact, one reviewer called it a polonaise for polar bears. Now, Nicky takes us inside this movement, including how he accomplishes one of the most difficult passages in the entire concerto.
Being concertmaster, I've had the opportunity to, play as soloist and in the orchestra as well. And especially the first time when I played it in from within the orchestra, playing the tutti part, I realized how challenging it was, for both the orchestra and the conductor, and furthermore the soloist. And like you said, there's a lot of things that kind of flow into each other. Rhythm is in a more grand kind of feeling, and to get everyone on the same page requires a lot of trust, a lot of sense of collaboration between conductor, soloist, and orchestra, right?
Yeah.
So I'm super looking forward to be able to collaborate with you and the WSO on this.
Well, so
Yeah.
one of the things that's interesting is for the first movement, for our audience members, they may find that Sibelius sort of creates a bit of a soundscape. He sort of takes you on this journey, and you almost get sort of a visual of Finland in the cold, and this sort of grandness. But the last
Yeah.
movement's quite different, isn't it? Talk to us a little bit about the last movement, because it is for sure like the opposite of that musically.
Yes, yes, for sure. Um, the last movement is yum, ba, ba, bum, ba, ba. It's got such strong um, rhythmic integrity, as opposed to what you said about the first movement, where it was there's a lot of polyrhythms, there's a lot of you know I wouldn't say murky, but just it's there's a certain freedom that's allowed,
Yeah.
in the first movement, and obviously freedom in terms of you know um, feeling it together. But in the last movement, it's just bum 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 bum. It's almost relentless. You got to be super precise. Everybody has to be feeling the same pulse at the same time, and obviously the solo violin part is very extremely virtuosic, and it's like a gymnastics kind of show there, with lots of arpeggios, lots of double stops, but when done effectively, it's a very exciting movement.
So let's get into the weeds just for 1 second for our violin students, because I know we have violin students who are going to be watching this video. In the last movement,
Okay.
there's this wonderfully difficult passage. I only know this from the times I've conducted it, watching the violinist and the looks on their faces, where they have to play these thirds going up. Da, 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 da. Talk to us about how you practice that particular section. To me, that seems like one of the scariest places in the whole concerto.
Yes, it is. First of all, it's you've got a challenging pattern of left hand thirds that it's double stops, having to play two notes at once, in fast succession, which makes it trickier, and also going up the violin to places that are very high up. So that's one part of it. But then the right hand, he requires, upbo staccato, which is, again, one of the most challenging bow techniques there is. For those of you who might not know what upbo staccato is, it's when you play very fast with super fast articulation in one direction of the bow. So it creates this really effective, kind of,
Yeah.
very exciting. Oops, sorry.
No. So basically what you're saying is that the two most difficult things you can do on the left hand and the right hand, Sibelius asks you to do them at once.
Exactly, yeah. And you can master one part of it, the left hand, you can master the right hand, but to put it together, that's a new challenge in itself.
That's awesome.
So in the concert, look out for it. We get 4 chances. It happens 4 times in the movement. So hopefully I get at least one of them okay.
Well, I have no doubt that you're going to get all four of them just fine. I'm super excited. The Sibelius Violin Concerto is written in such a way that you get a sense of a big soundscape, and you really don't feel the structure underneath, but there's a very tight structure underneath. The Enigma variations by Edward Elgar are the exact opposite. They are a set of variations, and it's super clear what the form of the piece is. There's a theme and a tune, and then 14 variations on that tune, and then a grand finale. So on October 21st, 1898, Edward Elgar was sitting in his living room with his wife Alice, and they were having a glass of wine and enjoying conversation together. And Elgar himself was sitting at the piano, just sort of tinkering away, and he played a beautiful melody. We're not exactly sure where this melody came from, but this was a captivating melody, one that caught Alice's attention. And so Edward immediately had the idea, what if I were to take this melody and change it based on the character of one of our friends? And so she would throw out the name of a friend, and he would play the melody just slightly different based on the characteristics of that friend. That was the genesis of the Enigma variations. Each variation is based on a friend of his. In fact, in the score, it says this piece is dedicated to my friends pictured within. Now, the Enigma, where does that title come from? It's not super clear because the Enigma really, we think, is based on the idea of the theme itself. Was the theme something that he wrote before? Was it something he borrowed from someone else? Was the theme the accompaniment to the actual theme? We just don't know, and it's one of the great mysteries of classical music. But I do know this theme is dark and beautiful and really interesting as he sort of takes it through these variations. Now, the variations work in two ways. One, each variation describes the general feel of the person that it's meant to depict. But then secondly, many of these friends of theirs, had a certain sort of idiosyncratic way about them, and he tried to capture those in sound as well. So as a couple of, for instances, the first variation, which is easily one of the most beautiful variations, depicts Alice, his wife. Variation 3 depicts a friend of theirs who was a baritone. Now, he was a very interesting sort of fellow because as he sang, much like that happens to a young person when they're going through their voice change, his voice would jump octaves. And so Elgar wrote this variation with it bouncing around. Variation 9 is probably the most famous of the variations in the set. It's called Nimrod, and it was written to express his feelings towards his publisher. And this is sort of his dedication to his publisher. Variation 14 is very mysterious indeed, and maybe another layer of enigma in this, because this is the only variation that we don't know which friend it was, although there is some thought that perhaps it was based on a mistress of Elgar's. The finale itself describes him. It describes Elgar, and it uses snippets from all of the other variations joined together to create this grand finale. What a way to end the season. Now, it's always so nice when we can hear directly from a composer themselves, and this is what Elgar himself said about the piece. There's nothing to be gained, he said, in an artistic or musical sense by solving the enigma of any of the personalities. The listener should hear the music as music and not trouble himself or herself with any intricacies of program. To me, the various personalities have been a source of inspiration. Their idolizations a pleasure, and one that has intensified as the years go by. I hope you enjoy hearing as much as we enjoy performing these two masterworks of the late 19th century.